Hey everybody, this is Sean Morgus. Just felt led to share a testimony, actually my life's testimony. Everybody definitely has a testimony to share. I believe it's very beneficial to speak it out, and hopefully you can help others as well. That's something that is definitely an advantage for people that are lost. There's a lot of people that go through tough times and they don't have any guidance, and then they end up, you know, taking their life, and it's not fair. Uh, it's not fair. We need voices out in the world, and when I was being brought through all this trials in my life, I always said, why do I have to share my testimony? I'm like, if anything, it's arrogance. Like, it's like, oh, I did this, I went through that. I'm gonna one up somebody else. I always thought that was a mentality, and it's really not. It's to really, when you think about it, it's to help others around you, that they may learn from your situations, and get motivation based off the strength that you received. And my strength was in Jesus. I'm gonna tell you first off, but it didn't always start like that. I grew up in a Catholic background, which is very tough for me. It was something like that was a chore to do, and I think a lot of people feel that way. I can't speak for everybody, but I know that there's definitely a lot of people in this world that I've met that said, my whole life I was brought to church, and I was forced to go there every week, and just to do it because my family wanted to force it on me. But there's a lot of stuff behind that. I mean, the Bible does say, raise the parents should raise up the children to be in the statutes and the commandments of God, and to walk in a righteous virtue, and to acknowledge that there is a one true God and He has a Son. Just principles in life, and not to be swayed by the enemy. But I kind of want to start off from ground one, or ground zero, as they would say. So as I was brought into this world, there was good things, there was bad things. One of the things that were kind of weird to me is that I had a father and a mother, but they split up, and I can't really pinpoint a time that I can remember where my mom and my dad were together. They were married, but I can't remember a time where they actually lived in the same house and they actually, you know, um, that I actually had that family atmosphere type of situation. I can't remember that. When I was growing up, there was always a lot of fighting. Um, I don't know for what reason. I know majority of it was from understanding what I was told is from the drinking aspect of my dad, and I don't know what put him in that state of mind to do that. But he definitely went that route. Growing up, I always wanted to cling to my dad because, in my mind, I was like, I'm a man, or, I'm a boy. And growing up to be a man, I want to walk in a man's footsteps, or even just follow a man. And my dad was that person that I tried to follow. And there was always bickering. Like, I always wanted to be by him. My mother never wanted that. She said that was a bad atmosphere. That was a bad situation. You don't want to be around that. I can't tell what he does. A lot of times he would take me to the bar, and I would just hang out at the bar, and my mom didn't like that, and rightfully so. I mean, for me being so young, it's kind of awkward, especially when you had to be 18 to play at the pool table, and I couldn't even play at the pool table. So my dad would actually yell and be like, have him play. He's here anyways. Nobody uses the pool table. Just allow him to do it. Um, but it's kind of spiking up a little bit. But I just want to let you know that, as I would watch my dad even work, he always had a beer on him. He was always drinking. I don't know if it was to calm his nerves, but for whatever reason, even on my birthday parties, he always tried to pour financially, into my life. Just try to show his love through money sometimes. And even when I was little, I was at Chuck E. Cheese, and he would be told to, please, sir, leave the store. We know that you have beer in your mug. Um, and that situation was kind of awkward. And I look at my dad like, Dad, is that true? And I knew it was, but I wanted to see what his reaction would be towards the person telling him, you can't be here if you're going to do that. And my dad would sit there and say, no, it's coffee, or it's pop. And that's definitely when I started realizing there was a control situation in it. But I was still young, so all I knew is, and from a premise, even being from a Catholic background, I guess I still understood the power of prayer. So in that premise, every birthday, and prayer should be all the time. But for me, I didn't really understand everything. I just know that miracles could happen. So I would pray, um, you know, after I blew out the candles every birthday, that my dad would stop drinking and smoking. And I prayed so intensely every year towards that same subject that, I even put it in my head, I'm sorry, God, maybe I'm asking too much. Lord, if you could just stop him from smoking, and I would just take the drinking situation out of it. Um, that really, that really was a trip for me, and maybe that's where I started losing faith when I was growing up. This was like probably, I don't know, my mind to go back is kind of tough, but maybe like 6 years, all the way to like 14 maybe. I would do that prayer every time I blew out the candles, hoping that something would happen, and all the way from the time frame of me being, and another thing too I want to branch back to is, I would see how important my dad was in my brother's eyes. And that's another reason why my dad was such a strong figure in my life, because I seen the importance that my brother had towards my dad, and the respect and the honor that he gave. And I said, this has to be a man that has integrity, and I'm definitely missing it. Um, and you know, as I got older, it was, and even when I was younger, I'd be in his house, and he would have me play video games, and he would stay in the kitchen and he would drink, and then fall asleep at the table, or kitchen table, and I would walk in and say, hey Dad, and he would be like, hey, what's up son? And he'd tell me to sit on his lap, and then I would talk to him, and then I would go back into the living room and play games, and just that situation, I don't know, it's kind of awkward, but I always wanted like that go out and play catch, or go out and play, or have a social, like building experience, that I would have life lessons, just that he would speak to me on a one-on-one level, but it never really happened. And then even growing up, when I started getting older, like 14 years, um, and all the way up, my mother started going through a lot of pains. She had, a car accident, and she had a lot of deep vein thrombosis, I think they call it, or where she had elevator legs. She had bone-to-bone carpal tunnel in her thumbs. Um, she had a bad gallbladder, bad ear infection. I mean, everything was attacking her, and she would stay in a room a lot. So even when I kind of started establishing my dad, it was hard to build a relationship, so I started kicking back and trying to figure out if I could build a relationship with my mother. It was kind of tough in that aspect too, because how much pain she was going through, and her being a Catholic, she'd pray to Mary, and she said, basically the suffering is something that she should go through, and it's an honor, and now that I believe in Jesus and everything, and we believe that we go straight to Jesus, it's more of a situation of being healed. God doesn't want you to go through that pain. He didn't inflict you with that pain. It's the enemy, and we're children of God, and sons of God, and daughters of God, and we're meant to be brought out of that. We're, God's pure. He's full of light. He's no darkness is in him. So why should darkness be in us? So, and that whole premise, right? So as I got older, I was more, so 14, 15, 16, I was active outside, because that was something I had to do. I couldn't just sit at home. There's really nothing there for me. Later on, I tried to figure out to get a dog. Maybe that would be something I could stay home more, but that was ended up being later on, and that was kind of a hassle even then. But I would, go out and play basketball, hang out with friends outside, and try to build rapport with them, and even try to like be in their families and see if like what they go through is something that I can learn lessons from, or even be kind of brought into another family. And something that I do want to share is my brother's been there for me, my whole life, and he's been the really one of a cornerstone that I like to say, which I give all the honor and glory to God and Jesus, but he's been a cornerstone that, or a rock, a pillar in my life that has sustained me, and he's made decisions to be in that situation. So there were situations where he was called to be somewhere else, and he put it in his hands, knowing my situation, and stayed here for me and my family. And he never left us, and that's something that I'll always honor him for. Something I'll always honor him for. It's just a tremendous blessing, and integrity is definitely upon my brother, and he definitely walks and with that situation that he went through, and went and decided to stick with us, is something that I'll always honor him for, and definitely respect him for that. But yeah, as I started getting older, sports was the big thing, because I remember I started playing basketball, then I rotated to football, and then wrestling. I know a guy named Ryan Gerbo who actually told me, he's like, "Why don't you wrestle, man?" I'm like, "No, you're telling me those people wear tights. What are you talking about? I'm not gonna do that. It's stupid." But he actually ended up talking me into it, and I ended up so liking it. But I knew more of the conditioning aspect was the best thing for me, because I loved football. And I did stick with football as my primary sport, which I loved. I was a vocal person, and I loved to get hype and intense, and I love to inflict pain. And I mean, it's not a good premise, inflicting pain, hurting other people was not, you know, I should have knew better not to do that. You could play a safe sport, and I'm not saying everybody should play sports with intensity, but the way I played it was literally to hurt people. And I remember when I was playing, I think in JV, we were going against the freshmen, something like that, and they had the varsity team over on the other half of the field. I had all this anger and pain in me from my dad never to stop. So my dad never stopped drinking or smoking, and I had all the anger in me, and I used it as tackling fuel. And as I used it as tackling fuel, I hit this guy so hard, it literally tore his whole shoulder apart. He had to have surgery. He couldn't play any more sports. The varsity squad told me, even the coach said it's the hardest hit he's ever seen in his life, or he's ever heard, because he didn't see it. They're actually looking away. But it was the hardest collision hit he's ever heard. But that's the mentality of pain I try to inflict, and it's not good. That wasn't a good thing, because it built a lot of anger and hate in myself, and to find a vocal point where I can release that pain upon somebody else it's not good, especially when somebody couldn't play sports for a long time after that. It's not pleasant. It's something I have to deal with. But so during that process, playing football, I ended up getting hurt. So I ended up having, it's kind of like, I want to say a coincidence, because I like to put pain on other people, but I had a weightlifting accident that pretty much blew out my back, my L4, L5. It made it basically called it Berlotti syndrome, where my hips got shifted over a little bit, and the transverse process ended up sticking on the hip bone, and it ended up pinching the nerve root, which was pretty hectic and painful. And I had that for 11 years, but in that process, it was me trying to figure out why that pain was there. So all I knew was I had pain in my buttock, but I didn't know how to diagnose myself. So I went to a doctor, and the doctor told me, he's just trying to get pain medicine. And I'm like, no, I just want to figure out why I can't hit anybody anymore, and why literally I have no strength in my right leg. Because in football, you have to drive off your legs, and you always get leverage on one of your legs. And my right leg was the best leverage leg, and that was the leg that was completely numb. So that kind of like crippled my whole hopes of football. And my ankle would roll all the time, because I had no strength, no feeling in my right leg. And I know Brian Bonser actually would testimony to that. He would testify to that because he would see it. Um, but yeah, so that whole thing, it took me a whole year to figure out what was wrong with me because they said I was trying to get pain medicine. And they eventually said, let's get an MRI, and my mom knew the situation, that it was pretty serious at that point, which she should already knew, but it was more of a disbelief that we would, that it wouldn't stay with me, that I would be healed from it, but it never happened. So all the way, so that happened when I was 17. 18, 19. So as I was trying to graduate high school, I had to deal with that pain. I could barely sit. I had to take a lot of pain medicine, which was Vicodin at the time. And um, it was really crazy because before that, my dad, he told me, he said, with that pain that you have, he's like, why don't you take medicine for it? And he gave me half of a painkiller, which was a Vicodin. And that was actually the stem of it, because I had Demerol or something, like it was like a muscle relaxer that didn't really work, but this actually helped. The Vicodin did, but it only lasted for so long that I actually took it during a football game because I was still trying to play, and I was just so like weak and relaxed. And it was weird because I went against this guy in the line and he was just blowing me back, and every play blowing me back, and I'm like, it's so awkward knowing the guy in front of you is weaker than you and he's destroying you. So in that premise, whatever, that's when I started like understanding like the significance of my pain and how I definitely had to stop playing, which was very, very traumatic on myself. And I beat myself up. I beat myself up for a long time because of that. And so, anyways, all the way to graduation, I graduated. I didn't get held back. It was by a miracle. But as I was 19, my dad passed away, and he had a massive heart attack, and he would sit there, and his money started getting shorter, so he started utilizing other means like vodka, and then he would make somas, all these things are, I shouldn't be telling you this, but he would do stuff like that, and he would get more relaxed, and he ended up having a surgery on his stomach that it ended up so they ended up cutting up his stomach, but he has a smoker's cough. So every morning the thing would come back up and rip up. And it was so much pain for him that it was more also of a means to get even more drunk and high to bypass that pain. And that same alcohol and pain medicine and the surgery, I don't know how or what could have controlled that and made it better. I know he could have probably went back in with the smoker's cough. It's very tough. But I do know that he's always tough, and he always tried to figure things out. But this was something he couldn't handle, and he took his life pretty much with medicine. And he had a massive heart attack. He went to the hospital. He ended up being on life support. The toughest talk was to have somebody, a doctor, walk up to my brother and me saying, we want to euthanize him. And I'm looking at him like, no, dude, what? Like, my dad has a chance. He's gonna fight. He's gonna make it through this. But he's like, yeah, we don't see him getting out of this. Definitely euthanize. It's where you take a massive amount of morphine and it relaxes their system, and he eventually goes into a coma state, takes his last breath, and it's over. And I fought and I said, no, 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 he's going to get better. He's going to get better. I didn't want him to take any of that medicine, and I didn't want him to end his life. I still believe there's a purpose, and then he can make it out of it. And it was just a bad mistake. But it ended up he ended up actually getting out of life support, but he ended up going into a private hospital where it was more like a rehabilitation. That was about probably like 2-3 weeks down the road, and he ended up passing away at the rehabilitation hospital. But the guy next to me said he did go in peace, and I know my uncle Elroy would do the Lord's Prayer and brought him to the salvation of the cross, and it brought a lot of comfort to me knowing that, and then the person saying that he went in peace. But I want to rewind a little bit back to a point where I noticed that he was taking the heavy amounts of vodka. I asked him and I said, you know, what do you? I'm like, do you believe in Jesus? And he sat there and he said, yeah. He's like, yeah, I do, definitely. And I looked at him like, you know, you really don't live it. In my opinion, that's what I was thinking. Like, you don't live it, but it kind of blew my mind. But I understood like the importance of even in him in his situation, he never lost God, and never lost the love of God, and never lost the love of Jesus, and it kind of sowed a seed in me. And I don't know what made me mention that, but something made me speak it out, and that seed was sown into me, and I believe that's really a meaning or a seed that was sown that ended up flourishing and brought me closer to Jesus and brought me back into that relationship. Um, but yeah, I mean, when my father did pass away, it was one of the hardest things just to see, like, you know, they give us the call, they let us know that he's in room so and so, and I walked in there and he was, you know, stiff and cold, and it's a reality hit me. You know, I'm like, at first I thought, how is my brother going to take it? And then the second of all, I thought, you know, all the prayers, and actually this actually did come into my head. Like, all the prayers that I prayed growing up never came to pass. That never happened. You know, he never stopped drinking and never stopped smoking. And I didn't really understand that. And I was like, and it's kind of reality, like how everything at that point, because I always tried to build a relationship with my dad, and it never really happened because of his drinking and everything. It kind of took away from my relationship with him. Um, but I always try to build that. And my whole life, I try to connect and try to make that possible, make that happen. And it never happened. And that was the reality, that at that day, it was done. There was no more, like, you know, having closure on having a dad that was there for me, the way I wanted him to be. But in that same measure, I ended up 2 years down the road, and you know, I still had all this back pain at the time, but at this time I was taking medicine for it. That I ended up starting to go into a Catholic church, and again, you know, past the fact of me being 16, my mom said, you know, you're 16, you're done, you're okay, you don't have to go anymore. Even though she wanted me to go, I kind of forced myself not to. So I think like at 22 or something like that, that's when I started going back to a church around my area in Flat Rock, and that ended up bringing me back closer to God, and I definitely had like that thing in my heart that I'm gonna be a difference, that I'm gonna be um, somebody that I pretty much told me I'm not gonna have anything holding me back, and that I want to make my dad proud. Even because I know he's in heaven, and I know, you know, that time I believe, you know, he's looking down, you know, he's watching me, and sure, I'm sure they can watch you, absolutely, and I know he's in heaven. The Lord's amazing. The salvation prayer and all that was happening, it's definitely brought him closer, and definitely didn't have any hatred in his heart. Brought peace, and it just brought comfort to me knowing that. But anyways, I just thought, you know, I could be a difference. I went to the Catholic Church, the Mass, every Sunday, and I ended up going closer to him, getting closer to him with an RCIA, but I still had that understanding, like, I'm not going to worship Mary or the saints. I'm just going to stay and strictly try to focus on Jesus. Um, and then I ended up finding out other stuff through the church, that there was a picture. Anyways, I won't get into that, but anyways, I ended up kind of branching out from that. But I had a traumatic experience. Well, actually, it was a great experience. That when I was in the RCIA, it felt like I had heat over my body, and like there was an arm or a hand over my shoulder. It was definitely crazy, but in that process, I got closer. But also in that same token, you know, my back and my leg was so bad that I had a cane. I actually had to use a cane just so I can balance myself out, and my hip was so messed up. And you know, I wanted to be healed, And my whole life building up, I since that injury, I couldn't understand why I couldn't be healed, but at the same time I knew I could live with it because of medicine, and that's terrible. But my pain ended up getting so bad that I needed morphine. I had to take morphine medicine just to subside or subdue me, because the pain was so unbearable. But I remember when I did get confirmed for the RCIA, I think it's called, um, that I ended up picking up the book, the Bible, and the Holy Book, and reading Genesis, and I'm like, this is crazy. I have to read all this, and I felt like, just read a bit by a bit, and I started reading into the Adam and Eve story, and it just blew my mind, and how sneaky, the snake was in the garden and all that. But anyways, I kind of build that want to read the Bible, in that atmosphere, that realm. But in connection wise, my whole life I was going through stuff, going through traumatic experiences, and especially when I was 19 years old and I graduated, my dad passed away. They they actually cut my insurance, and my insurance, I couldn't get any help from the hospital, and so I had to go to, I think it was Henry Ford in Detroit, and they had a sponsorship going on for the Detroit Lions, and they ended up giving me a neurostimulator implant. So it basically sends mixed signals to your brain when you're in pain. So that was a breakthrough. That was a miracle, but that took about like a year and a half to even get help. Just because, if you don't have any insurance, it's not impossible, but it's hard to get help. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of applications, a lot of tries. But I eventually got help, and that was definitely a miracle. Um, but the key premise is, that after 11 years, so I was 17 when I got hurt, and I had 3 back surgeries during the whole time frame. The biggest medicine that I was on was morphine, and that was the one that actually helped me the most. I was in a lot of pain where I would take morphine and literally I wouldn't feel like the high. Like, it literally took away the pain. I felt relaxed, but I wouldn't feel like, oh wow, like I couldn't move. I could function, I could move, because the pain was so tremendous that the medicine kind of drew to the pain. And it's a weird thing. I don't know. But anyways, it took 11 years. So 11 years I got my healing. And I was 17 all the way to 28. So when I was 28, that's when I was crying out to God. And I didn't want to be on morphine anymore. I'm 29 now, so it's actually a very close time frame. I was calling out to God, and I said, I don't want to take pain medicine anymore. I don't want to rely off the government for help. I want everything in my life just to get better. I want to progress. I don't want to be the tail. I want to be the head. I don't want to be, those things. I want to be the top, not beneath. Situations like that, like scripture, you're just talking over yourself. And also, by his stripes, he was wounded for our transgressions, bruised for iniquities. The chastisement of his peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. I would speak that. I would speak the Isaiah 53:5. John 3:16. So he so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever shall believe in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Stuff like that. I just kept saying scripture over myself, and I cried out from the deepest part and wanting the healing, and God brought a miracle to me. And it's sad that it took so long, because it's like now I look back on my life and I'm like, so much time was wasted, and but in the same process, I was in church from 24 all the way to 28, 29, and I was reaching out to God, and he was building me. So that's another thing, is that when my father passed away, the Lord gave me a scripture. Jesus gave me a scripture, and he said, I think it's Psalms 27:10. It is Psalms 27:10, that when your mother or your father forsake you, the Lord will take you up. The Lord took me up as the father, he was my father. He took me up, and he's always had a hand of provision in my life because of that. and I've always felt peace. Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He make me lay down in greener pastures, lead me beside still streams. He restoreth my soul. He lead me on the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod, thy staff, thy comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy follow me the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord. The Lord told me that that was my scripture to remember for my life. And he was my protector. He was my father. And at the same time, he was building me up to be a better person. And at the same time, when I started going to the church, it was a non-denominational church after the transition of the Catholic Church. My mother still stayed at the Catholic Church. And I ended up taking her out of the Catholic Church and bringing her into, well, God did, but I was a vessel. And then she ended up coming to the non-denominational church, and life's just been changing for the better significantly. I mean, I remember times where my mom was in the Catholic Church, and even in this new apartment that we're in, she would be praying the rosary and literally just laying there all day and just talking about how the pain that she's going through is something that's meant to be, and it's not. It is not meant to be. You are meant to be healed, delivered, and whole, set free. That's your purpose. Your destiny is to have a relationship with the Father, and for him to lead you and guide you and protect you, and to never stray you left or right, but to put you on a path of a straight path. But the same premise, I just want to let you know that, there was hurts in my life, and we all have a testimony. And for me, testimonies are very hard. I didn't write this out. I could have probably made it look a lot better, but I just want to speak from my heart. And there's a lot of back and forth, but I'm trying to let you know, just pinpoint situations that were detrimental to my life, and what kind of molded me. But I mean, in that same measure, I'm healed. And the person that you see now is somebody that's dedicated, somebody that is fully healed to the utmost, somebody that's able to do workouts that I've never been able to do. I'm able to upkeep my body. I'm able to work 12-hour shifts. Before, I was only able to work 4 because the pain was so severe. Now I'm able to work 12. And now I'm doing drives out to Novi. I mean, that's 45 minutes. It's crazy how God has blessed me, and I exalt him for that. And for me to even be lifting the amount of weight I do now is a tremendous blessing. And that I'm able to be on this health guide direction is another blessing. And I want to get into other ventures too. I'm just heating up. I'm 29 years old, and it seemed like my whole life passed, but it hasn't. It's just starting now. And now it's time for not me to make a name for myself, but for God to guide me, that I may be a good provider for the future family I'm going to be with. And I'm just so excited for that future. So don't give up. There was a lot of times where I was in so much pain. I had 6 30-milligram morphine pills in my hand, and I would sit there and contemplate, should I just take it? I was in that stage where I would peel the dang things and I would take them. I was flirting with death because I thought that was the lifestyle I needed. I got so faded that I would say I can't feel my face. I could barely breathe. My excitement was going to the doctor's office to get medicine. And that was not a lifestyle I wanted. And a connection between the alcohol and all that, to see what my dad went through, and to know that I can never build a relationship because of the division that set, to know the point where he actually did take his life through the somas, through the painkillers, through the vodka, the straight drinking. He literally had a gallon of vodka and he drank that in like 2 days. I think that's why I do have a wall up for drinking, why it does hurt me. I never really looked at that before, but I think that's really the wall in a setting. But just know that whatever you're going through, do not give up. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. God is there for you, whether you believe or not. Just know that there's somebody that created you. There's somebody that put value on your life. There's somebody that knew you before you came out. It said, before I formed you, I knew you. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. Isaiah 1:5. No, I see it. It's Jeremiah 1:5. God knew you. I mean, that's precious. We're all living lives. We're a living testimony. We're a pillar, a beacon of light to somebody else that is near us. We can't create division, and I fell emotionally into situations where I have been a part of division, and we cannot do it anymore. We have to fix this. We have to unite. We have to be one. We have to know that we are all part of the same family, that we are meant for better things, that what we see and what people go through in poverty situations isn't truly you. It's a situation you're in. Get out of it. Educate yourself. Read. Study. Know that what your parents went through is not what you're to go through too. Be a pillar and a beacon. Raise up and show your strength. And if you can't, give glory to God, because He's going to guide you through it. I knew nothing. I literally, the last 11th and 12th grade, I barely passed. It was a miracle. I have no idea what the heck I read, what I studied. Literally, it was a joke to me. It was a blur. I mean, to be honest with you, I was in 11th and 12th grade, and I had M&M bags, and it was all full of Vicodin because I was in so much pain. This is real testimonies, guys. I don't want to say, like, mentioning the drug names are just terrible, but that's something that I went through. That's something that I did. That was a happiness for me. That was a safe place. I used to go and be like, oh, I'm in so much pain, but when I get home, you know, I would be out for 2 hours, and I would be unbearable pain, and I'd be like, when I get home, I get to finally relax and get high. It's terrible. Terrible thinking. You have to realign your mind. Have clarity. See. Know the future. What I mean by know the future is build stones where you know where you're starting at now is going to end up being over here. What does it take to get here? You're here, you know this situation because it sucks. You're trying to get out of it, but what does it take to get here? Study. What is your ambitions? What is your passions? What did God call you to be? We're all made different. We all have certain talents. Sometimes I wish I was more talented in other aspects, like reading, man. If I could read, shoot. You know, but, you know, I got, okay. But anyways, you know, my specialties are really, like, I say weightlifting. I have a lot of passion. I open my heart a lot, so when I go to sales, I like going in sales because I can kind of pour myself out to the person I'm speaking to. I can look them dead in the eyes and know that, and let them know that I care for them, even if they're somebody random. You know, so just passion, love, and just the ability to grow my body at a rate that's hard for others is something that God has blessed me with. You know, just find what you're good at. Find what God gifted you at. Something that comes easy to you but not easy to others is that connection point to what you're meant and destined to be. So grow in that. Expand on that. Look for people. We have the world in our fingertips. You can look up anybody at any given time. Know what you're good at and research and say who's good at this, who's the best, who has the best income, who makes the best net profit gross per year. Look that up and then say, how did he get there? You know, motivate yourself. I believe in you. I know you can get past what you're going through now. I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I know the situation that you went through don't define you. It doesn't, what you went through, that pain, that hurt, is not something that's going to say, I'm going to stay there and deal with that and dwell with that, and that's something that's going to always encase me. That is not encasing you. That's a pillar that you got out of. That's something that you were climbing out of, something that you were stuck in, but you got out of, that you're going to stay out of. Don't go back to that situation, whatever it may be. You know, I don't want to relate and point situation or fingers on any particular activity that can bring you to that point, you know yourself. Whatever happened to you and got you in that one situation, know to get out of that situation. Know to not be stuck and fade back into those habits, but to expand yourself and your mind and know and figure out how can you do better. What's ways to grow? You know, recently I was dealing with a situation where I was drinking too much coffee. I have to figure out ways to slow that down. It's not a good thing for you. I mean, literally, if you look at coffee, it's just like a drug. It's one of the most addictive things in this world. That's why you get people going to coffee shops every day spending $3. I mean, it's an addiction. And I realize that. I'm like, you know, who am I to say who's addicted to what when I'm addicted to coffee? So that's something I'm trying to grow out of. Just figure out things that are grabbing a hold of you, things that are controlling your life. And coffee really wasn't controlling me, but at the same time, it was making me feel like I can't get through my day unless I have more energy. Find those things and just figure out ways to get past that. You know, diagram and wire your mind to think different. Label what is controlling you, that way you know the name of it, and know to not settle for that name again. You know, I'm just branching into just, I don't know, I hope I'm reaching somebody near this end point. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but just know that you can get out of your situation, that if you went through a situation, use that testimony for others. Allow the person next to you to grow from it. You know, even if it's your family. I mean, sit there and talk and be like, you know, what I've went through is tough. And you were here with me this whole time, but we're getting out of this. You know, be that strength. Be the strength in your family to rise up and to be a difference maker. You were called to be a difference maker. You were called to be great. You were predestined before the foundations of the world to be a light on somebody's life. Be that light. Don't settle for less, but grow for more. And hopefully this testimony helps you. If I missed anything in my testimony, I would love to expand and show more. But I think this is kind of a diagram to bring it all in. If you have a testimony, please share it, because this wasn't easy for me. I don't like sharing testimonies. It feels weird to me. But I know it's going to help somebody, and it'll bring comfort to some people. And I'm just saying, you know, the same measure that I spoke out, please speak back out as well and share your testimony, because I know there's testimonies that are a lot more hurtful and a lot more, you know, just share it. I don't want to say that it's worse than yours, worse than mine, but just know that whatever your situation is, share it. That way we can grow from it. If we all shared what was a bad situation and how we got out of it and the testimony from that, you can save somebody else from going through that same situation. Well, hopefully that helps. You know, have a blessed day. Just know that you're a game changer in this game called life, and you're meant to be a difference for the people around you. So rise up, be strengthened, stay focused.